I'm from Thomson Reuters in Philadelphia. I've been working there for 36 years, a long time. I worked for Dr. Garfield back in, when I started back in, at ISI. And so I've seen a lot of things change and a lot of things developed. And I'm going to talk today a little bit about all of that. We're going to talk about the Web of Science a bit, Web of Science coverage a bit, and then how to use Web of Science metrics, because Web of Science itself, although it is a research discovery tool, we've added a number of things to it that allow you to mine it for publication insight, for author insight, and for journal insight. So we're going to show you that very briefly. And then we're going to talk about the journal citation reports, as well as a couple of other things, including something called Manuscript Matcher. And then finally, we're going to end talking about Scholar One, which is our publication system that is used by publishers for advancing scholarship in an expedited way. Major publishers are using it, and also it has something in it called Reviewer Locator, which I can show you a picture of. So we're going to talk about all of that very quickly. And if you have any questions, or if I'm going too fast and we're stuck. Okay. Starting again, thank you. So we're going to look at the Web of Science a little bit and talk about its coverage, as well as how do you use it. It was designed, as I said, for research discovery, but the metrics are in it, and you can mine the Web of Science for publication insight, to look at authors in a discipline, to look at journals in a discipline, to see what institutions are publishing, and also we have various tools built into it, something called the citation report, which you can use to look at topically as well as at the author level. Then we'll take a look at journal citation reports. We're going to look at Manuscript Matcher, and then finally Scholar One manuscripts very quickly. So we have a long history in this industry. Dr. Garfield founded, the Web of Science is now 20 years old. It came out in 1996. Dr. Garfield founded ISI in 1958, I believe, when Current Contents came out. A lot of things have happened in that time, and we have a number of different tools and resources. But one of the things that is the most important thing about what we do is the coverage and how we index what we include in our data. Because from that data, we produce everything that we do. And it is by far the most consistent, comprehensive, indexed set of high-impact, peer-reviewed journals, conference proceedings, and books in the world. All selected one by one without any, very neutrally. So citations measure the number of times a paper has been cited. Everyone's familiar with that. They give you an indication of how a paper is being used, how somebody in your discipline is taking your paper or your science or your research in the social sciences and then taking it forward in time. And that's a very relevant thing. For research discovery, it allows you citations. When you think about the Web of Science, it's nothing but a network of connections. The web was the perfect medium for it. So you could traverse the literature. You could begin with a topic 50 years ago and then move all the way up to the current week to see who's citing it. And all the way you would find papers that are related to what you're doing because they've all cited that same seminal work that you started from. The other thing you can do is go backwards in time. So you can begin with a current piece of data, a current research paper, and then see when that subject area was first mentioned in the literature. And because we do all of the cited references, 75 to 80 million of them in every year, indexed one by one to produce a scannable, browsable set of references for you to use in your research, you can do that traversing of the literature. And included on our platform, though, we have about 115 million records, because we have all of this other data on the platform, as you can see in the square, from other resources, subject-specific discipline resources like BIOSIS, zoological records, something called the Data Citation Index. All of these are connected together through the Web of Science Core Collection, the foundational resource. We're not going to talk about that today, but it's important to understand that the Web of Science Core Collection, the journal literature that we cover, the books and the conference proceedings, form the core of everything that we do. So, okay. So, I'm sorry. So the philosophy of our database is to include the highest quality content. We can't include everything, so we're very, very picky about what we select. We review on average about 3,000 journals per year. About 12%, 10 to 12% of them are selected. And we've been doing that for about 50 years now, because the Science Citation Index came into being in 1962, the first annual, so it's over 50 years old. So the selection is based on these very, very exact selection criteria that we've built over time. They've changed, certainly, but we're still very much, we adhere to these selection criteria when selecting the content. And today we have 16 full-time people in Philadelphia selecting the content. They're in charge of all of the disciplines. They have their librarians with subject specialties in the physical sciences, applied life sciences, arts and humanities, social sciences, and they have about 150 years of experience when you look at them all collectively, and that helps us select the journals. As I said, 3,000 journals were evaluated in 2015, 12% acceptance rate. And we are not a publisher, so we're very, very neutral. We are not, we don't cover anything unless it meets. It adds to the content in the Web of Science. It has very exacting publishing standards, and it's cited, and it is diverse in its nature, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So none of the editors are doing anything else but this job, day in and day out, 365 days a year, and that's a very, very important thing. And we're very neutral and objective. We cover print journals still. Most of what we cover today is electronically available. But even though it's electronically available, we're not just pouring it into our data. We're indexing it paper by paper. And we build an authority file to make sure that every journal issue of the same title is done the same way. So it's document typed, original research papers, review papers, etc. So all of that is done in a consistent format. So the collection then, the Web of Science Core Collection itself, the Science Citation Index expanded, the Social Sciences Citation Index, the Arts and Humanities Citation Index, the Conference Proceedings Citation Index, the Book Citation Index, and the new version, the new edition we've added just last November called the Emerging Sources Citation Index. These are titles that are not yet cited, but they're evaluated one by one, and we're putting them into the Web of Science Core Collection as a separate edition. So all told, we have 64 million records in this resource, going back to 1898, with over 1 billion cited references, every one of them indexed and scannable, browsable, so you can look for an author and see all the works that he has written and where they've been cited and how many times, and do a cited reference search and move forward in time to find who's taken that piece of literature or that science and taken it forward. We're very multidisciplinary. We cover 252 categories, disciplines. In the sciences, social sciences, and arts and humanities, we're independent and neutral. As I said, we have 17,700 journals on the platform as of today. 12,000 annual conferences are included. The most important meetings in the sciences, social sciences, and arts and humanities, and over 80,000 books. We're selecting 10,000 volumes per year to add to the database. The journals, books, and conference proceedings are all indexed cover to cover. So nothing is left out. Consistent indexing. So every original research paper in a journal is covered. Every author is included. Every address is included. So you're not missing any information. And the database is high quality value metadata. As I said, 100% cited references, 100% authors, author affiliations, and funding agencies from 2008. So you can see who's funding the important science that you might want to move into and where you might want to look for money for your research. So it is a trusted citation resource, and today it's used in 7,539 international research universities and research institutes in 120 countries. So we have countrywide consortia all over Europe, in Latin America, Canada, etc. So how do you use the Web of Science? When you're using the Web of Science, it's primarily for discovery, but you can use something called results analysis. So very quickly, you can click on a button and you can see what are the document types in this particular topic. What countries are collaborating with my research or in my topic, because you want to monitor what's happening in those countries. You can also look at the institutions we co-author with. So if it's your publication or a topical base, you can just click on results analysis and select author, and it will show you who is co-authoring with that important research. You can look at the research areas. So I'm looking at an institution. I want to see where they're publishing, so I can see what categories or disciplines they're publishing in. And each time I do this, I can then narrow my search using the checkboxes that are up on the screen. You can't see those very well. You can also look at what journals or conferences or books we're publishing in. So if I did a topical-based search, I could say, I need to monitor these particular journals because they are important to my research. I'm beginning my career at the university. I'm not aware of all the different publications in my discipline, but this is going to help me find the most important ones. So that's very key for someone beginning his research career. For an expert researcher, they use this as well. And what major funding agencies fund our research in this topic? So if I'm doing the same type of research in this discipline, I want to look at the funding agencies because from 2008, we've processed all of that funding agency information, including grant number, so that you can see who's funding the research in this area and where you might want to look for funding for your important scientific research. So I did a search then on a journal, Revista Mexicana de Ingeniería Química, and I used the results analysis. At the top of the page, it says rank the records by this field, and you see in the top left that you see the number, the authors publishing in that field and how many records they have. And you can set this up so that you can get the top 10, the top 25, the top 50, the top 100, or you can set it up so that you see only those people who've published X number of papers. But below that, you see the countries that are involved in that publication. And absolutely, naturally, Mexico is at the top of the list with 418 papers. And you see below it Colombia, Spain, USA. So we're collaborating with you in this journal. And these are the people collaborating from what countries. And then you see the institutions over to the right. So quickly you can scan to give you insight into the literature very quickly by using this results analysis. You see all of the institutions listed, and any one of them I can zero in on those papers, the top one being the Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana, 82 papers. I could click on that and actually see those papers and then do another results analysis to further look at the authors that have written those papers from that institution. There's something called a citation report in the Web of Science. It was originally came out to help authors, but it can also be used at the journal level, and that's what I've done. I've taken that same journal and I did a citation report. We found 466 papers, and you see the number of published items in each year and the number of citations in each year. And then over to the right, you see the number of results, the sum of the times cited, so these papers have been cited totally in the database 928 times. Without self-citations, 435 times. So that's over a 50% rate of self-citation then, which is a pretty high rate. The total number of citing articles in the database that have cited this journal are 618, and without self-citations, 393, and you see the H-index of this journal at 9. An H-index for a journal doesn't really make much sense, but we can calculate that. And then at the bottom of the screen, you see one by one the papers in citation and time-cited order. So the first paper was cited the most, and you see the average citations per year for the set, as well as the average citations per year for each paper. So if you're looking at your own research, if you're a publishing author, and you have a diverse publication, you can do an author search, move this here into the citation report. This all can be downloaded so that you can create graphical pictures of it as well. As a topic, though, you'd be able to see what are the most important papers in my topic. If I'm researching, let's say, climate change in Mexico or in the western part of Mexico, I could then go into the citation report and see who's publishing those papers, and each one of them then I can move to a marked list if I want to save them for later. So we've also integrated Web of Science with the journal citation reports. Everyone's familiar with the journal citation reports, the JCR, because of the impact factor. So as a subscriber to the JCR, we've integrated that data together. So as a researcher, you see immediately, there's a click view journal information. So as a researcher, you can immediately see the importance of this publication, in addition to the number of times it's cited, this paper. But you see this publication is in quartile 3 in all 3 of its categories, and you also get the impact factor. And from this point, you can link right over to the JCR and continue using the journal citation reports. So it's a quick way for researchers to gauge the importance of whether they might want to publish in this particular journal. So you can access the journal citation reports right from Web of Science, and we've also integrated Essential Science Indicators. Essential Science Indicators is a paper-based, just what it says, essential, meaning the top 1%. We split the data into 22 different categories, 21 of them in the sciences, 1 in the social sciences, and we allow you then to scan the literature for the top 1% of papers in those categories. And what we've done is we've integrated both hot papers and highly cited papers. A highly cited paper is a paper that has gained a particular citation threshold over 10 years. And we've studied the citation thresholds for each of the 22 categories. A hot paper is measured as soon as it's published in the Web of Science, then it becomes a hot paper. And it's measured in bi-monthly periods for 2 years. And if it exceeds a certain citation threshold, gets a number of citations, then it becomes a hot paper. And we mark these papers in the Web of Science for you, and you can zero in your topic to see what the hot papers are, what the highly cited papers are. Over a 2-year period, the hot papers, a 10-year period for the highly cited papers. And that can be used for evaluation as well. So let's continue with the JCR at this point. The JCR initially came out to serve librarians for collection development. For authors, it helps you to make decisions on where you want to publish. And there are other things you can do with it as well. University administrators to gauge the impact of journals in which faculty are publishing. For journal publishers, they want to monitor what their own journals are doing, but they also want to monitor their competitor journals. Journal editors want to track the influence of their editorial practices over time, because they make changes in a journal. What happens then? What is the impact of that? And then also bibliometricians and information analysts want to engage and develop and study the citation metrics. So while researchers who are beginning their year, their research careers have, when you're beginning to research, you may not know all the journals in your particular discipline. We cover, 17,700 journals. You might not know what are the most important journals in your discipline. Where should I publish? So what we've done is we've developed something called Manuscript Matcher. So for those early career researchers who want to publish, this resource is freely available in EndNote Web, in the online version, in your Web of Science subscriptions, so that what you can do then is take your manuscript title, keywords, and your abstract, as well as the cited references, import them into Manuscript Matcher, and what happens is that it will go out to the Web of Science, analyze all the text, algorithmically make decisions where you might consider to publish. Because these journals that it comes up with, and it comes up with a set of 10, have articles that are similar to yours in journals. So you can see that you see that it gives you not only the match score, it gives you the JCR impact factor, it gives you an indicator whether the journal is open access, it tells you how many similar type articles are in that journal, and it allows you then to submit also the manuscript right to the journal publisher. So it very clearly helps early career researchers find where they might want to publish before they know all of the journals in their particular discipline. So the JCR is more than the impact factor, as we know. And I'm going to talk about some of these other metrics very quickly. We'll start with the impact factor, but the journal citation metrics and information. We have the impact factor, total citations, immediacy index, self-citations. We also have journal citation relationships, the cited and cited journals. We have related journals. We also have publication information, percentage of citable items, the source data, the subject category. The JCR is used within its subject category. That's one thing I think everyone needs to understand. When you're looking at the JCR, it's important to view journals within their subject category, because if you try, because citation thresholds in different categories, they're just different. It takes longer for an article to be cited in mathematics than in applied life sciences. That everyone knows. There aren't as many citations. So it's important to look at the data within its subject category. The impact factor is a valuable indicator of journal influence, but within its own within the category. If you're comparing things outside of categories, then it becomes an indicator which is not that reliable, because you're comparing apples to oranges. we'd like to say. So it's a measurement of the quality. It's not the measurement of a quality of an individual's or department's or institution's research output. It's a journal indicator, and that's the other thing. Now, many people equate the impact factor, and it's very important. You can say, I've published in these journals, they have a high impact factor, and that's very, very important, and they use that for promotion and tenure in many different systems. But it's not an indicator of the article that the person wrote. It's just an average metric for an original research paper in that journal in that year, the number of cites it might get. And it's a very, very simple calculation. So when you're using the journal impact factor, it's very transparent. Everyone can understand it. You don't have to be a bibliometrician. And that's very, very key. And that's why I think it's so well known and used, because everyone can understand it. It is simply the number of citations to a journal in the current year to the recently published articles, so in the last 2 years. So in 2015, in the journal Science, how many citations did Science get to articles written in Science from 2014 and 2013, divided by the number of original citable items, original research papers and review articles that are written in Science magazine for those 2 years, 2013 and 2014. Very simple calculation. To do this, though, you need all of the data, and that's the key thing that I talked about at the beginning. We do cover-to-cover indexing. This would not be possible without that cover-to-cover consistent, comprehensive indexing. We've also included a 5-year impact factor. Why is that important? Many of you may be in the physical sciences, computer sciences, mathematics, subject disciplines that do not receive a tremendous number of citations quickly. And it's very, very important for those. The articles take a longer time to gestate, to receive citations. So we created this for those disciplines. And it's been in the data since 2008. So we're more than the impact factor, though. You see a picture of the journal citation reports on Insights, and you see all of the different indicators that come up. We're not going to talk about all of those, but we'll talk about a few of them. Okay. So again, I used the same journal then, the Revista Mexicana de Ingeniería Química, and you see all of the various metrics. I included all of them that are available across the screen. And you see total cites, journal impact factor without journal self-cites, 5-year impact factor, immediacy index, citable items, the number of items that are considered as part of the journal impact factor, cited half-life, citing half-life, the eigenfactor score, the article influence score. These are 2 metrics that come out of the University of Washington. They use our data to produce these, and they are freely available. We've incorporated them, integrated them into JCR. The normalized eigenfactor and the average journal impact factor percentile. So let's take a look at a few of these. The immediacy index. So in today's world, there are more, every day, there are more online journals that are available openly, in open access. What does that mean? They're available faster than a print journal. They're an electronic journal, certainly. They are available and probably seen more quickly than a journal that's a commercial publication, right? So what does that mean? They can be cited more quickly. So the immediacy index measures the number of citations in a journal from the current year, the articles that are cited in the same year. So if you have an immediacy index of 2.5, it means that on average, every article in that journal written in 2015, if we're in 2015, was cited 2.5 times in the same year. So that's an indicator of how quickly this research is used in the data. And journals in the applied life sciences get a higher immediacy index. And we've studied this. There are a couple of essays up on our website where we looked at clinical medical journals, because it was claimed that the clinical medical journals that are available in open access would get a higher impact factor because they're more quickly available for people, so they're cited more quickly. And that's the truth. They are cited more quickly, but over time it doesn't really affect the impact factor. What it does affect then is the immediacy index. So this is important if you want your data to be seen quickly, because this data, these journals are in the population much more quickly than journals that have a lower immediacy index. So the half-life. Now, the cited half-life is an important indicator. What it means is that it's the number of years counting from the current year going backwards that you have to count how many years backwards until you account for 50% of the citations that a journal receives in the current year. In other words, if I have an immediacy index, if a journal has an immediacy index of, let's say, 5, it means that I have to go back 5 years, so the articles written 5 years ago are still being cited. They account for 50% of the citations that journal is receiving in the current year. So that means that this journal, these articles are still very much in the user community and being cited. Now, this was an important measurement when we had print publications, because for a library, if something has a high cited half-life, it means it's still needed. You have to keep it on the shelf. But it's an important indicator nonetheless in the electronic age as well, because it means that this data continues to be relevant. The research being published in this journal continues to be relevant for a number of years. And some journals have over 10. So you have to go back 10 years before you reach 50% of the citations that the journal receives in the current year. So the eigenfactor score. Now, it's a little different. The eigenfactor score actually was developed by the University of Washington Bergstrom Labs, and it is a score that takes the latest 5 years of citation data for a journal, discounts all self-citations, and then looks at the citations to the journal and gives a higher score to those journals citing that journal. The journal getting cited gets a higher score if the journal citing it has a higher impact. So the more important the journals cite your publication, then the higher the eigenfactor score will be. So it's a weighted indicator, and it's very important because it tells you a journal's overall contribution to the whole of scholarly journal influence. What it means is that it gives you a percentage of the total weighted citations that a journal receives from all the journals in the JCR. So we take all the journals in the JCR, all of the citations, and do this analysis. Article influence, another eigenfactor metric, presents article level influence. It's a calculation, incorporates the eigenfactor score, but it's normalized so that the average article in the entire Thomson Journal Citation Reports database has if you add them all together, they equal 1. So it tells you about the influence of a journal, an average journal in the JCR. It adds an additional perspective to the overall influence of that journal. And finally, the journal impact factor percentile, a relatively new metric that we added to the JCR. Now, this metric, I described it yesterday a little bit, but it allows you to take journals from different categories and actually look at them together, because what it gives you is a percentile, which is it transforms the rank in the category, the number, like if my journal is 30th in a category of 100, so it transforms that rank into a percentile value, allowing more meaningful cross-category classification and comparison. So you see this for the journal. This is the journal that we're looking at is indeed the Revista Mexicana again. And you see that in 2015 that it is in the 32nd percentile on 2015 over to the right. And that means that there are 68% of the journals in the category are higher, have a higher impact. That's still pretty good though. And you see how that's changing over time. Stuck again. I can just use that. I can use the arrow here if it works. Okay. So, very importantly, when you're doing work in the JCR, especially librarians, but also researchers wanting to look at where you might want to publish, you can compare journals in the JCR. You couldn't do this before the Insights version of JCR came about, but it allows you to compare between two or more journals using this compare feature. And very simply, it allows you to take the journals, put them together, and then give you a list of them where you can look at various metrics. And here they are. So you can look at them across all years. Comparisons of selected journals. You can select multiple journals as well, not just I have 2 in this selection. And I'm looking at them from 1997 onward, which is the first year the journal citation reports came on the web, on the internet. So you can select the years, select the metric that you want to look at. And in this case, I think I'm looking at impact factor without self-citations. I can look at impact factor. I can look at total cites. You can select the metric you want and look at it over time and compare the journals. So for collection development, that's a very, very important tool. And you can save this picture as well and put it into a report if you have to make critical collection development decisions. Journal impact factor, percentile, and quartile and category. Just to give you a sense of this is the same journal that we were looking at. It's the engineering journal, Revista Mexicana, and you see the rank in the 2 categories in quartile 3 and 4, and how it's moved up in 2015. And then in chemical engineering, also it's moved up into quartile 3, and the percentile that it attained in that category. And the percentiles are different within category as well. So if you were comparing different journals, you could use that journal's impact factor percentile to do a relative comparison between them if you had to make decisions or you wanted to find out where you might publish. Now, sometimes the data is very similar, and sometimes it's not. So that's the journal citation reports very quickly. And so I'm going to move on very quickly to Scholar One. Researchers who want to publish and publishers use systems like Scholar One Manuscript to advance the publishing process, to make it very effective and efficient. And Scholar One Manuscripts is a system, it's a web-based manuscript submission system, but it has a lot of things built into it. And as a researcher, if I'm submitting my manuscript to one of these publishers that uses Scholar One manuscripts, it will be automatically parsed into author, title, keywords, the references, and they will be checked against the Web of Science automatically for their to make sure they're correct, to see if they're correct. And then also they can use something called Reviewer Finder, Reviewer Locator, excuse me. Reviewer Locator is a tool that we've developed which is an add-on for publishers, which allows them then to find reviewers for publications. So many publishers, over 365 societies and publishers use ScholarOne manuscripts. They're using Reviewer Locator. So what it does, it searches the Web of Science for people who have written similar articles, who have been cited, who have publishing records, and it will suggest them as reviewers for your manuscript automatically. And then once they're selected, the system allows them to communicate back and forth when they read your manuscript and communicate with you as the author if you need to make changes or anything needs to happen before your manuscript can be accepted. So it makes the publishing process very, very effective and very efficient. And these systems are being used, 90% of all of the major publishers are using ScholarOne manuscripts at this point, and they've integrated EndNote into it. So if you've written your publication with EndNote, then it can just be sent to the publisher automatically. Once it is received, it can be parsed into the system, it can be loaded into the system, it uses Reviewer Locator then to find reviewers to consider your manuscript so that the publishing process is made much more efficient. And for authors, that's a very, very important tool, that sending that, and it makes it very effective and efficient, because obviously you want to know the status of what you've done. You're writing your manuscript, preparing it using EndNote or a bibliographic management software, and you send your manuscript off in a format and you want to hear as quickly as possible. Systems like these are good for reviewers, they're good for publishers, and they're good for authors. And that's all I have. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? I think we have some time. I'm not sure. Yeah. Yes. Which one? This one? This one. More? This one?
No, before ending your presentation.
Before the third one,
The third to last. Okay. This?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? I didn't talk about cited and citing relationships, but in the JCR, journals, as we all know, are very expensive. You can't have every journal you would want. Professors in every discipline are making requests to the library to subscribe to particular journals. So citing and cited relationships give you a sense of how often journals are similar, because if they're citing each other, there's a relationship between those journals, and they may be so similar that you can do with just one of them, or they're both very, very important journals in their category. So all of the data has to be weighed very carefully before you make a decision, obviously. Did you have a question, Dan?
from your point of view, what are the main differences between ScholarOne and the Open Bibliography system?
For open publishing system? Well, it's supported by all of the Thomson Reuters data and tools. Number one, ScholarOne is. So you're able to use the Web of Science. It uses the Web of Science core collection data to help make critical decisions about publishing, about that manuscript. It incorporates EndNote into it, so if you're writing your manuscript, it makes it much faster. It's not an open system. It uses all the combined tools of Thomson Reuters to make the publishing process more effective and efficient.
And there is any possibility to integrate the platform from RGS to Scholar One?
Well, I think we'd have to look at that very carefully before any decision could be made. There are ways to take data that has been, there are other publishing systems on the market besides Scholar One manuscripts, obviously, and there are ways to take that data and bring it into Scholar One, and also ways to take Scholar One data into those systems if publishers change. And that happens once in a while when they change systems. So there is a way to do that. Some work would have to be done, though, and it would have to be considered very carefully before it was done.
The same Scholar One requires institutions have subscription to Web of Science to improve all functionalities. For example,
No, the publisher has an add-on that automatically uses the Web of Science data for your manuscript. It has nothing to do with your institution. Obviously, we hope you're using Web of Science to write your paper, but when you submit the manuscript, it is the publisher system outside of your institutional subscription to Web of Science that's accessing the Web of Science to do that searching and parsing and looking for the reviewers. So it has nothing to do with your institutional Web of Science subscription.
Thanks, Jeff, for the presentation or conference. I have one question here. Is Scholar One free or has any cost?
Oh, no, it is a fee-based system. It is used by 365 societies, publishers worldwide. 90% of the large publishers use it. And the fee is based on, it's a graduated fee based on submissions. So it's basically like if you have 50 journals, 100 journals, 200 journals, obviously the costs are going to be higher. But it goes all the way down to, I think it's under $10,000 for the system. If you're a small society publisher, you have a couple of titles. So it's relatively inexpensive, and then it can be very expensive for, yeah, so it's scaled. Yes?
Can you explain a little how the indexing of proceedings work, of conference proceedings work?
Sure. Well, they are indexed the same way journals are, except there are some additional things done for the conference proceedings. We index, when a conference proceeding is a monograph, let's say, a book published where the papers presented at a conference are collected and published in book form, electronically or print format. It's simply a collection of papers. They're papers just like a journal paper, but they were presented at a conference. So the conference information is indexed, the conference location, the name of the conference, the sponsor of the conference, the date of the conference, all of that is indexed at the monograph level and then attached to the paper as well. So, and then we index the papers as if they were journal articles, all the cited references, all the authors, etc. So the indexing is no different, it's just a different type of publication. And the same for books. Books are, a monograph, a book volume can be single-authored or it can be multi-authored. The multi-authored are nothing more than a collection of essays written about a particular topic, an in-depth examination of one particular topic. That's what a book is. So we index all of the chapters by different people. They're multi-authored. If it's a single-authored book, then we still index the chapter titles of each chapter because we want you to find the book. So we create a way for you to find the book, even though it's a single author book, by indexing every one of the chapters and then all the cited references, etc. Yeah.
In your scope of core collection, you include emerging journal citation input. What is the criteria for include journal in this category? And this category form part of the GCR?
The Emerging Sources Citation Index came out last November. We studied our data very, very carefully over the past 10 years. And, think about it. International collaboration is getting bigger and bigger. So you have people from different countries. The US, for example, collaborates with China more than any other country. It was not like that 2 years ago even. So Mexico's writing more papers. Mexico's collaborating with different countries in Latin America and also outside of Latin America. So our data informed us that the international research community was getting smaller. The Web of Science, as I said, it's available in 7,539 institutions. So the eyes of all those researchers at all those institutions are on this international peer-reviewed literature. So as people continue to write papers together, then it made sense for us to look at the regional literature coming out of every country very carefully, but to consider it to be collected together into something we call the Emerging Sources Citation Index. It's a separate edition. The journals in that edition do not get impact factors. They are not impact factors. And we evaluate them one by one, and with the same careful consideration. So we look at we're looking at the publication standards. We're looking at ethical publishing standards. We're looking at the editorial board if it's a new publication. Timeliness is not so important. It will become important this year as we enter into the second year of the Emerging Sources Citation Index. Because if it's a quarterly publication, we will expect 4 issues in the year. If we don't get them, then we will contact the publisher. If there's something wrong, then it could be deselected. So these titles, though, will be sitting in an edition that outside of the Science Citation Index Expanded, Social Sciences, and Arts and Humanities editions. They do not get impact factors, but they're indexed the same way with 100% metadata, titles, all authors, all author addresses, funding information, and all of the cited references. They're citing the peer-reviewed literature, and the peer-reviewed literature is beginning to cite them. 19 of the titles have already moved from the emerging sources to the core the three major editions: science, social sciences, and arts and humanities. Now the emerging, and we're studying the category together with the emerging sources to see if any of these journals are then cited as often as journals that are in the, let's say, social sciences. We study a category of the social sciences. We'll pull all the titles together, including the emerging sources, study the citations to see if some of the emerging sources data is being cited equally or even higher. If it is, then those titles may move into the Social Sciences Citation Index, and we'll just continue adding to the emerging sources. We identified 13,000 titles to evaluate. We've evaluated about 9,000 of them at this point, and we've selected about 5,700 titles. They're not all in the product yet because we have to sign agreement. These are new publishers. So they're not people that we dealt with before, and we have to have an agreement to include their content. 68% of them are open access, 62% of them are open access. Most of them are electronic. So it expedites the indexing process, but still they're being indexed with the same care and consideration. So they do not get impact factors, but their journals may move into the 3 major editions. And some titles in the 3 major editions, if they fall below, they'll move out into the emerging sources as well.
Is possible for titles from Mexico not include in Cielo Citation Index for part of emerging journal, or is one Silver Citation Index for
Well, we have special relationships with CIELO, with the Russian, with eLibrary, the publisher of the Russian Science Citation Index, with the Korean Journal Database publisher, and also the Chinese Science Citation Database. So the 13,000 titles that we originally looked at, we tried to stay away from replicating what we already had in the regional indexes that we've added to the Web of Science platform. But some of them are overlapped. It's just a natural thing that they will be in, and that's not a bad thing. It's giving that journal some prestige. And they may move into the core 3 editions at some point. Yes?
In your opinion, which of the impact factor are more fair? The 5 years or the classic impact factor?
Which one is more important?
More fair, more fair.
I think it depends on the discipline. If you're in the applied clinical medicine or applied life sciences, then the citation frequencies are very high. Things are cited very, very quickly. Look at Science, Nature, these weekly publications, JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, PLOS, Biology, PLOS One, Public Library of Science journals. They're out there very quickly. They're covering topics that are very, very important, even so they're being cited very quickly. So the citation frequencies are very, very quick. So for those subject categories, that's a perfect metric to have. For disciplines, social sciences, for example, nursing, mathematics, computer sciences, engineering categories, where it takes a while for something to be cited. That's why we created the 5-year impact factor for those disciplines, because it sort of evened things out. Thank you very much. Thank you. And